Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Barth. I'm a Public Information Officer with Pacific Northwest Team 2. Wanted to thank you and welcome you to tonight's public meeting for the Schneider Springs Fire. Again, this is a virtual public meeting for the Schneider Springs Fire. Today is Monday, August 23rd, and we're really glad you're able to join us. Before we get started, I just wanted to encourage folks to, if they have questions or comments about the fire, please go ahead and put them in the comments. We'll be trying to address those throughout the meeting, and if we don't get to them during the meeting, we'll be happy to answer those throughout the evening and continue to answer your questions as long as we're here. Wanted to also let folks know that this live meeting is being recorded, and we will post it onto the Facebook page after the meeting is done. So that will also have closed captioning, so folks that want to watch it can watch it on Facebook at a later time and share it with your friends. We will also post a recording of this meeting onto the Schneider Springs Fire YouTube channel as well, so folks can watch it there if they'd like to as well. Again, just to give folks a little bit of context, the Schneider Springs Fire as of this morning is 68,193 acres. We remain at 3% containment, and we have about 550 personnel assigned to the fire. For our meeting tonight, we're going to hear from a number of different speakers to give you perspective and a deeper understanding about what's happening on the fire. And those speakers tonight, we're going to have Chuck Redmond, who's our incident meteorologist, followed by Barry Kleckler, who's our fire behavior analyst. Then we're going to hear from our operations section chief, Reggie Bray. We will have Yakima Valley Emergency Management Association's Tony Miller, who's going to provide some comments as well. Then we'll hear from the Forest Service, Aaron Stockton, and Washington DNR, that will be Miles Pollock. And finally, we'll hear comments from our incident commander, Rob Allen. At the end of that, we'll entertain questions that are coming in through the chat. So again, put your questions in the chat and we'll answer those from the speakers that we have here tonight as we go through the evening. So with that, I'd like to ask Chuck Redmond to come up and tell us about the weather. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. Chuck Redmond, the incident meteorologist on this fire, and work at the National Weather Service office in Boise. So this summer was pretty much the summer of extremes. We've had temperatures 100 to 120 across the Pacific Northwest, but temperatures are moderated. Here in the next couple days, we're going to have basically an onshore flow into the Pacific Northwest, and that's going to moderate the temperatures quite a bit. We're looking at temperatures to be about 10 degrees below normal, and humidity is up fairly high. And actually the next front is going to start pushing into the Pacific Northwest on Wednesday in that onshore flow. Actually, you'll probably see a little bit of precipitation too. Not a whole bunch, definitely not a wetting rain, but just more moisture added to the atmosphere. Looking at the weather for towards the end of the week, we're going to continue that onshore flow. But temperatures are going to be pretty much close to normal. Normal temperatures for the lower elevations across the area this time of year are in the lower 80s. And so we're going to be right around that temperature mark towards the end of the week after this cold front goes through. But after this cold front does go through, we are going to look at breezy conditions. So kind of a lull in the winds here the next couple days. But behind that front towards the end of the week, we'll see those winds kick up again. But again, the humidities are going to be fairly high. And like I said, that's going to continue through the end of the week and into the weekend. So if there's any weather questions, I'll be standing by towards the end.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Barry Kleckler. I'm the fire behavior analyst here with the incident management team. When we talk about fire behavior, when we try and analyze fire behavior, we're looking at three factors. We're looking at weather, which Chuck talked about for us. We're looking at fuels in the fire area, and we're looking at the topography that the fire is burning in. So, like I said, Chuck covered the weather. We have, weather conditions have reduced quite a bit from when this fire was making its major growth in the last few weeks. And we don't really have any of those wind events in our future that could push this fire in any particular direction at the time. What that weather has also helped to do is it's helped to add a little moisture to our fuels that are out there. And the fuels absorb moisture from the air, they absorb the relative humidity, and fuel moisture is a factor, especially with our fine fuels. Those are the fuels that carry the fire. What we have out there burning now are a lot of our heavier fuels, our down logs, our dead trees, those sorts of things are continuing to burn. Fire is continuing to be active, really mostly through the day and into the nighttime hours. And what those logs, those big trees do when they burn up is they often roll down the hill, and that's where we're getting a lot of our fire spread right now, is the fire rolling down the hill, fire rolling down in towards the 410 corridor, slowly rolling down to the north, and that's where we're seeing little bits of spread. Where we do have a little bit of potential for some spread is towards the southwest end. When we do get winds, our stronger winds in the area typically are from the northwest, and this southeast corner of the fire does have potential to spread uphill in some areas towards the Bethel Ridge area. And folks will talk about the plans that we have in place for that. That's one of the areas we're keeping an eye on. In the to the west side, as our fire burns into the William Douglas Wilderness, fire is burning uphill. It's burning into heavier fuels up in there. It's burning towards some rockier ridge lines. So as we watch that fire to the west continue to burn up with those hills, we'll be monitoring how high into the elevations it can get before it starts running into rocks and those sort of things, and which we expect to slow down quite a bit of its progression to the west. I'll also be around, after the meeting to answer any of your questions that you have about the fire behavior that we're expecting. Thanks.
Good evening, Reggie Bray, Operations Chief for Pacific Northwest Team 2. I'll be going over some of the operational, the big picture, the why, and also kind of our plans for the next few days. One thing to talk about is we want to talk about our priorities on this fire and operational intent. What we came in, looked at the strategy, and determined that the areas to the south and east of the fire here along the Highway 12 corridor and the 410 corridor, where all the homes, those values, those are what we want to protect. You heard fire weather, fire behavior, talk about the conditions coming up in the next few days. So what we're looking at, is this fire wanting to move to the south and to the southeast. So we're adjusting some of our priorities, moving resources around, really wanting to protect those values and put resources in the corridor of the Bumping River, the Natchez River corridor along Highway 410, and also down here on Highway 12. So really focusing on these are our priorities, protecting these values, and building a plan to do that. So I'll talk a little bit about the plan. We'll start over here on the west side of the fire, west near Bumping Lake, the Bumping River Road. Crews are continuing to just work in there around Goose Prairie, just north of there where the fire moved down into Cougar Flat. Just making sure that doesn't cross the Bumping River Road. They're securing the perimeter there, and they're also building, constructing, and improving the Bumping River Road as a containment line. Up on the north end of the fire, around the 410 corridor, we've taken those resources, put them down along the river corridor, along Bumping River and the Natchez River, and we're really focusing on structure protection, doing assessment and triage, and looking at building control features in behind those structures, so in anticipation of fire movement to the north. It doesn't really want to do that right now. The fire continues to back north in a backing fashion down slope against the wind, but we want to be prepared for that. As we move around to the east side, crews have been able to secure line here around Nile up into the Clover Springs Road. That's all looking really good. They continue to mop up, monitor and patrol that up from the Clover Springs Road to the 1600 Road and then up to the 250. As we get north of that, the terrain gets to where it's just not safe to put firefighters in there. And so we're continuing to monitor that, but that's why we're putting in some indirect line and moving resources down here along that corridor to protect those values. As we move on to the south toward the Bethel Ridge Road, crews have tied that into Bethel Ridge, but we still have uncontained fire here in Little Rattlesnake Creek. So to protect these values, we found the Bethel Ridge as a very good control feature, and so crews are strengthening this building line to protect the values back toward the 410 and the 12 junction and Natchez. They're looking at working across the Bethel Ridge to the William O. Douglas Wilderness, connecting roads, just land features, ridges, and tying that in there in a direct line, and in anticipation of firing actions that we will be implementing here in the next few days. And once those lines are in and complete, we'll be watching, monitoring the fire, looking at the weather, determining the best day to do that, and we'll begin some firing to contain this on the southeast side of the fire. Moving over into the toward the wilderness, just keeping fire north of the Highway 12, looking at connecting some roads with indirect line and tying that in, putting that, getting the fire away up and toward the wilderness, away from those values. If there's any questions, I'll be here to answer them. Thanks.
Good evening, Tony Miller with Emergency Management. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the evacuations, what's happening there. So yesterday morning, the new team started, relieving the old team. We did some good work. They did some assessments. They talked to me. At that time, we talked about changing the evacuation levels. So we did that. So starting at noon yesterday, we were able to change some of the evacuation levels, which was good. Some people got to go home. We'll start at the Bumping Lake area there. The Bumping Road, we did not lower that. That is still a level 3. A couple reasons. We do have fire activity down in there. And the team has a bunch of crews in there shoring up those lines and stuff. So the safety of the public, safety of the crews, we decided to keep that at a level 3. From there, from the Bumping Road, 410 down, from the Bumping Road all the way down to the Y, we were able to move that back into a level 2 to let people get back home. I know some of you have been out for quite a while, so that was good news. This team and these crews are doing a really good job keeping that area safe in there. Remember, that is a level 2, be set. Nothing's ever for sure right now with these fires. They've been having pretty severe activity this year. So just still be aware that something could happen. With that, we go down to Highway 12. We put that into a level 2 this last week. That right now, with how things are going, we put back into a level 1. Be ready. Doesn't mean you have to have everything packed, but be aware, stay tuned, make sure nothing changes, and if it does, we will get that out immediately. For that's how it's going to stay right now. You heard from the weather and fire behavior. Hopefully it holds, and we can get this thing taken care of. There's been no structures lost so far in this fire. We had one up on the 1500, had a little bit of damage, but no structure loss. And again, just like everybody else, if you have any questions, please feel put them in the comments and we'll address them. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Aaron Stockton, the District Ranger on the Natchez Ranger District with the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. I want to talk to you a little bit about forest closures. First off, I want to emphasize that a forest closure order and an evacuation level are two different things. Evacuation levels are set to protect those private homes on private properties and are done so by the county. Forest closures are done by the Forest Service, and we take public safety into account when we set those up. And so if you've been following the incident, you know that we've had several reiterations of closure orders over the last 3 weeks, and they've largely grown. And the reason for that is that the fire footprint has grown, and as we evaluate daily the risk to areas outside the current footprint, we might need to expand those orders as we have done. So if you're familiar with the current order, it goes from Raven's Roost area in the Little Natchez all the way down south to Conrad Meadows, south of Highway 12. As been mentioned before, we do have some moderation of the weather, which has given us a chance to take a look at conditions and looking at that, plus some of the mitigation measures that we have been able to do in places that we have been able to hold the fire. We've made some evaluations to see if there's some areas that we might be able to open back up to the public. So this week we are looking at opening up the Little Natchez area, north of Highway 410, and those areas northeast of Highway 410. We still have concerns, obviously, within the central part of the closure, and then down south from Rimrock Lake up. We also consider not only threats from fire itself, but also some of the activities in our firefighters as they prepare areas. So as you've heard us talk about establishing line and reinforcing line, we'll have a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of crews in and out Forest Service roads. And so while we might have closure outside of an active fire area, that's to protect the public and our crews that are actively working in those areas. We also utilize the lakes for aviation operations. You've seen some videos on Facebook of some of our scooper planes that will land in the water to collect water to take up onto the fire. And those resources cannot utilize those lakes if folks are out on those lakes in their boats. So that's another consideration that we have. The closure goes to the west to the Pacific Crest Trail. The Pacific Crest Trail itself is not within that closure area. So at this time, hikers can hike the Pacific Crest Trail from White Pass to Chinook Pass, but we ask that they not go to any areas on the east side of the Pacific Crest Trail. Also, as we do open up other parts of the district, like the Little Natchez, for folks to come recreate, I remind you that we are still in level 2 fire restrictions. So we ask that you recreate responsibly, no campfires, beware of driving off of roads, tall grasses, and things like that. So please check our Facebook and Forest Service websites for those latest restrictions and to see what closures we have in place and as those change. Thanks.
Good evening, Miles Pollock with the Washington DNR here in the local Yakima unit. The Washington DNR is responsible for fire protection on state and private timbered ground in the state of Washington. And this fire may have started on U.S. Forest Service ground, but the reality is that with the incidents that we respond to and that our partner agencies respond to, that the reality of fire is that it is complex and challenging and requires that we work together in cooperation. And because of that, the DNR has been involved from very early on in this incident. The fire now has burned onto state and private lands and DNR protection. And that's primarily along this eastern side and on the southeastern portion within the planned area on that primary line. I want to take a minute to reiterate and reinforce what Aaron was saying regarding closures for the Washington DNR. Eastern DNR lands are also closed to public use and no campfires within that area. And I'd like to close with just thanking the team, the Pacific Northwest team, our local cooperators and the partnerships that we have with them, with the fire districts, with the U.S. Forest Service, and the ability for us to work together for complex incidents. And I'd also like to thank the firefighters who are actively engaged in suppressing the fire, and thank the local community for all of the support that you've shown to the firefighters and to the agencies here. Thank you.
And good evening, my name is Rob Allen. I'm the Incident Commander for Pacific Northwest Team 2. We got here just a few days ago, transitioned out with the Eastern Area team, which I'm sure you've talked to before. Had a good, smooth transition with them. It was great to get that information that they had and coming in and starting to look at what we're doing. You heard Reggie talking about changing up some of the strategies that we're working on here right now. There's a little over 500 people working on this fire right now. And given the current activity levels in the rest of the region, both Oregon and Washington, and in Northern California, which had several large fires take off on them today. We're probably not going to get more than 500 people to work on this fire. So as we're looking at the areas that we have of our concern, we're trying to put the crews that we have and the knowledge and skills that we have in the right place at the right time. And right now, as Reggie said, our highest priority right now is keeping this fire from moving any farther to the south. And that's where we see there's a lot of potential there. We talk every day about closure areas and evacuations and trying to make sure that we're keeping in mind that we need to keep Highway 12 open. We want to keep the 410 open. We want to make sure that just as soon as we can get into getting the rivers and the lakes and everything else back open for recreation, knowing that a big weekend is coming up. But right now, our real effort right now is for public safety. We're putting a lot of effort on Bethel Ridge, trying to get that tied in. If we don't stop it on Bethel Ridge, our next stop is coming down to Highway 12. So really giving us the time to get in there and do that, and giving us the space to make that happen is what we're asking for right now. One of the questions that I did see pop up was, how do we do percent containment? When it turns black, that's when we call it contained. That's one of the other hard parts on this, right? So every place that we get on this fire that we're going to call contained has had a crew go out there at some point and literally somebody walking along the edge, putting their hands in the ash and making sure that it's cold and it's not going to go anywhere, and then we'll call it contained. That takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of energy. And we've just got a very few firefighters, right? So we won't see a lot of containment, big jumps in containment on this fire as we focus in the crews that we have in the areas that we need to get to right now. We know that this, as Aaron was pointing out, we're lifting the evacuation levels, but there's still a forest closure. There's still a closure and still level 3 evacuations along Bumping Lake Road. The reason we've got fire right on the edge there, it's not a very wide road. We have crews in there. We'll be monitoring the fire going across there and keeping an eye on it, and having to do backfires as we're moving along also. So we need to keep that space open for firefighters. Any place where we only have one way in and one way out is pretty dicey when we've got fire operations going on. We're keeping an eye on things. We're working with the Fire Marshal's office for getting some extra structure protection help in here with State Mob and a couple of task force coming in hopefully here soon to give us a hand there along this whole 410 corridor, which is still very important. But as we know this area and we've seen where the fire's going, it hasn't moved across that upper end in a few days. It hasn't moved in a lot of places in a few days. It's hung up in some good areas right now. We're getting a break in the weather and the fire behavior. So we're going to put our energies into places where we know the fire wants to move. Been very active along the southern end all day. You saw a lot of extra helicopter activity in there. We had a good day for flying, and they were working mostly in this lower area here where we know we've got fire moving forward. So again, we can't do this alone. It takes everybody to help us out. All of our cooperators, the state, the counties, all of our local fire departments. We've got people here from across the country helping. We've contractors, Forest Service, BLM, state partners, everybody coming in to do this together, and we ask for your help also as we're doing this. Asking the questions that you're asking right now so we can get the information out so people know what's happening, but also then that you have that idea that we're working really hard to try to tie up some things so that we can get things back open for you into the future. So with that, we'll take some questions, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Rob, and I want to thank all of our speakers tonight. We have been getting a number of questions in the comments, so I appreciate that. And again, we'll continue to answer those and monitor those this evening. There were a couple that we asked some of our speakers to address during their remarks, so we did hopefully answer some of the questions. I do have a series of questions I was going to ask. Share your questions for our Operations Section Chief, Reggie Bray. And Reggie, if you could come on up here, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the first one. And the first question was, any planned firing operations in the Old River Road area by cabins?
Yeah, so the Old River Road is up here in the northeast part of the fire. And so we currently no plans to implement any firing actions in there, but we do want to prepare for that. And so as you've heard from the previous speakers, this fire is not really wanting to move north right now, but we want to be prepared for that scenario. And so you're going to begin to see a lot of resources start to come in there, start to work around those structures. You're going to see equipment, firefighters, a lot of people just assessing and then actually work getting done. in anticipation of that. We will set up management action points to determine if we need to implement that. And of course, we'll be putting that messaging out, that information out, if that looks like that's going to be at some point. But right now, currently, no plans to do that yet.
All right, great. Thank you, Reggie. The next question for Reggie is, what's the outlook for Nile Road? And again, that's currently in a level 2 evac, so Nile Road.
Yeah, so Nile Road is here on the east side, and right now, with the bit of containment, the 3% that you see is just currently to the west of that. So that looks secure. As you move north, though, we have unsecured line, and so I would anticipate that level 2 to stay in place for some time, just because of the amount of uncontained fire that is still there on the landscape.
Great, thank you, Reggie. Another question that we had in the comments, and again, appreciate that, was Cougar Flat Campground destroyed?
So Cougar Flat is where the fire came down along the Bumping River Road and came across the river, and continues to be something that we're putting a lot of effort into and focus. It did burn in there, but the campground is not destroyed. It has fire in it, fire around it. So, you know, that it will look a bit different, but it's not destroyed. It's still intact.
All right, great. Thank you, Reggie. I have one more question for you from our folks online. Little Rattlesnake Jeep Trail and the status. And again, I know there's a lot of recreationists out there, so if you could just talk about what the fire's doing around Little Rattlesnake.
So Little Rattlesnake fire has made its way into the lower portion of Little Rattlesnake. There's still quite a bit that's unburned. Some of that Jeep Trail is within the fire perimeter, and some is not, but anticipate that most of it, especially with us implementing our strategy and putting fire back in here just to contain and to protect these values, you probably will see most of that that will be inside the fire perimeter in the future.
Great, thanks, Reggie. That's all that we have for you. All right, so the next series of questions are for Aaron Stockton from the Forest Service. So I'm going to ask Aaron to come on up, and Aaron, I'll read you these questions. The first one, if you could address, what actions has the forest authorized in wilderness?
Sure. So to date, we have not taken any action in the wilderness proper. Just everything has been outside of the wilderness. We do look at that. We have considered the possible use of retardant early on, but it was not going to be feasible. And we look at the rate of success versus the impact. And so to date, we have not taken any direct action within the wilderness.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Next question is closures along Highway 12 and Titan River. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know that's a challenging one. Will they impact commercial rafting, and is there a date to open the Reservoir Road?
Sure. So that's down here, and we are aware of the flip-flop and the rafting season on the Titan Road downstream from Rimrock Lake, and that area is currently closed to access on Forest Service lands. So all those different pull-offs that folks are accessing to get to the river, those areas are currently closed. We do have ongoing conversations with some of the commercial rafting company guides, and we're monitoring the situation every day to determine what the risk would be when those activities are slated to commence.
And again, a number of questions coming in about that area. So the next one that we had was the time frame for opening Rimrock and Clear Lake camping. Again, I think you kind of just spoke about that. Not really sure about the time frame for that.
Yeah, correct. Yep. So we will we monitor it every day. We look at the situation as Commander Allen talked about, and ultimately we want to get those areas open as soon as we can. But as I've said in past meetings, life is our #1 priority. And we're going to make the decisions that we have to make to protect the public and our firefighters.
Okay, great, Aaron. And this one, actually, I'll have Rob also ask him to come on up too for this. So can Rimrock Lake cabin owners, I'll let you address it first, Aaron, if you'd like. Can Rimrock Lake cabin owners access Forest Service cabins to get belongings?
Sure. So this district does have a very high number of recreational residents, residents that operate under a special use permit on leased properties, permitted properties in in Forest Service. And so we have allowed owners with verification that they are in fact the owners to retrieve belongings that may be irreplaceable to them within their cabins, as long as conditions are safe enough to do so. So what we ask is that if you are one of those cabin owners, you get a hold of us at the office, and we can talk about conditions and arrangements to retrieve anything, as I said, if it is safe to do so at that time.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Have a question for Incident Commander Rob Allen. Rob, if you could speak to the Bear team when they might start to work to minimize erosion and mud flow.
Okay, it was one of the questions I wanted to grab here. Not only do I get to play the Incident Commander for this role too here, but on the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, I'm the Forest Fire Management Officer, and that's one of the things we'll be looking at. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to get across is when we look at this map and we see that everything on this map is all red, our impression, right, is that everything in there has been destroyed. And that really is not the case. When you get out there and get a chance to look around this fire, the fire had a couple of days where it made some big runs. It has some areas that it cleaned up, but a lot of places that it's burning in right now, it's a backing fire. It's moving along slowly. It's taking care of things that we would normally be doing when we do our prescribed burns in the spring and in the fall. So just because a lot of this is showing as all red right now doesn't mean that it's all to that point where everything's been slicked off like you see when the press comes in and we try to get pictures of things. They like the dramatic stuff. And we get places where all the trees have been taken out. So as we work through, it goes through kind of in phases. We work really hard at trying to stop the fire right now. We have a bunch of folks from the forest and that we've brought in from other forests that are resource advisors to help us out, making sure that as we're putting things in to control the fire, we're not doing any more damage than we have to, so we can control the fire. The Reeds will be in there, start building a repair plan. So after that, we'll go back in. After we've caught the fire and we've put the fire in a good spot, we'll start doing repair work where we go back in and fix all the things that we damaged. At the same time we're doing that, the forest will stand up a Bear team, a burn area emergency repair team, to come in and look at streamside stabilization, hillside stabilizations and other things. So there's still a ways out before we start putting that plan together. Still trying to stop the fire and knowing exactly where it's going to be is the first part, so that it's safe for them to get in and take a look at those things. Part of the thing that we're working on right now, just because of the increased fire activity across the nation right now and the competition for resources, trying to find the middle management people, the div soups, the heavy equipment bosses to work with some of that equipment that would come in and do repair work and do some of that bear work is on hold across the nation right now, as we're trying to put all those folks out to make sure that we're stopping fires that are impacting communities and other values at risk. So it's going to be a bit of a juggling game by the time we can get back in there, but the forest will start working on a plan to pick up all the things that are of high priority for us. We'll have to prioritize, just as we are now, where we can put the resources we have to stop the fire, prioritizing where we go in first and start working on that repair work, and then getting into the bear work also. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rob. We do have one more question for Aaron from the Forest Service. Just a little bit more speaking to the forest closure south of Highway 12.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, we evaluate almost on a daily basis, looking at our closure and seeing what the fire activity is. When we put that closure into effect, we had seen the fire make several mile run in one operating period. And as Commander Allen said, we're looking at options in this area to secure the fire up here on the ridge. But we still want to make sure that we have other options down below that in case we need to do that. So south of Highway 12 here, down Tieton Road, if you're familiar with the area, you know that Tieton Road, everything accessed below here is only accessed by 2 points on Tieton Road. And so in the event that something occurred and we were not able to hold the fire on Highway 12, evacuating folks out of the Remrock area and south would be extremely difficult with only 2 ways in and out. So we're still evaluating it. We're looking to see what the fire may do and what the safety is and what plans we can implement. And as soon as it's safe to do so, we'll look at opening that area.
All right, thank you. And again, I wanted to thank all the folks who are watching on Facebook Live. and appreciate all the questions. Please go ahead and continue to put those questions in there. We'll monitor those and answer those. I know that we have a few still that we're going to do a little bit more research and get back to you. And again, I want to thank all our speakers for being here to present tonight. Hopefully this meeting was helpful and very insightful to help give a clear picture of what's happening on the Schneider Springs fire. We appreciate your engagement and watching tonight. I do want to remind folks that after this live meeting is done, we will have it posted so you can watch the recording with closed captioning on Facebook, on the Schneider Springs Facebook page, this page right here. We will also be posting this meeting, the recording of this meeting onto the YouTube page so folks can watch it there if that might be easier for them. Again, I want to remind folks that we do have folks, our public information officers are out in the community providing updates and information daily in the area right around the fire. We do have an INCI web page, so if you search INCI web and look for the Schneider Springs fire, you can find out a bunch of information about what's happening on the fire. We have videos and maps and links and all kinds of posts that we share there, so please check that resource out. And if you do have questions, you can call our fire information line, which is 509-653-1468, or you can email us at 2021.schneidersprings@firenet.gov. Again, I want to thank you all for your engagement tonight. I appreciate you joining us. And with that, we will be announcing any future meetings for the Schneider Springs fire in our updates. Thanks again.